Cool. Welcome to Tempo Community Call, April 2024, Tax Edition. Today we have a pretty cool, I went into this morning thinking we did not have a strong agenda, but it's actually pretty good. Let's get some names in here. I'll start with mine. Anyone else is welcome to put theirs in, and I'll put Doc in the chat. As always, throughout the course of our adventure today, if you have questions, feel free to unmute and ask, type in chat, or throw them in the doc, whatever you're most comfortable with. We'll do our best to answer. This is very informal and always an AMA, so you are welcome to ask questions about anything you want. So operating tempo, future work, what it's like to be at Grafana, or anything that's on your mind, I suppose. Feel free to ask. We do have a pretty cool agenda today. Again, I didn't think we would, but we do. And we're going to start with Mario, who went to Grafanacon. I think he was the only person here who went to Grafanacon from our side. Mm-hmm. And just to give us his overview, his summary, I suppose. I will stop presenting so he can show us all the cool stuff.
Oh, okay. I don't have really anything prepared, but I can share the agenda. I don't know. But yeah, so this Tuesday and Wednesday, so basically yesterday and the day before, it was Grafanacon in Amsterdam. It was this event. In the past, it was more around Grafana, only Grafana, but this year it was expanded to include more of the open source ecosystem. So there were presentations and announcements around Loki, Mimir. We didn't have a big announcement around, so maybe if it had happened 2 months later, maybe we would have had something. But still, it was really nice. I think it was the biggest event we've done so far. But yeah, there were a lot of attendees, lots of chatting. I mean, I ended exhausted of talking that much, sort of moving from one extreme, being isolated, working from home, to speaking for like 14 hours straight. But yeah, it was awesome. It's always great to speak to the wider community. And so as for the content, so nothing was streamed, but I believe all the sessions will be available on demand. I was told the keynote will be available on Monday, but it seems it's already here, so you can go watch it. I suppose especially the Torkel's part when he demos new cool stuff that is happening in Grafana 11. I think, yeah, that's pretty interesting. It's not about traces, it's more about metrics, but still a very cool feature called Explore Metrics. And yeah, and the rest of the sessions will be available, I believe, in roughly 2 weeks, also in demand here. I wanted to highlight one, which was about transforming logs into traces. So where is it? Full agenda. It happened here by Case Boss. So it was really nice because it was about really showed what the capabilities and how powerful traces can be. It was essentially the same data, the same source of data. You had some log lines, but being able to represent them as a trace was key on this investigation of an incident that this person had, which would have been very difficult to get to just by inspecting the logs or that data as logs, basically. So it's really cool. And yeah, it's also nice to see that I don't know, at least myself, I think of traces of certain use cases. I assume everyone instruments their applications with tracing, but many people don't, and still there are ways of taking advantage of tracing and thinking of outside of the box how to use tracing in general. This session was very cool.
I've always wanted to find cool other use cases for tracing, and one that I've wanted to do for a hackathon and never have is find a threaded conversation board like Reddit or whatever, scrape a bunch of data and turn that into traces, because you could visualize the time maybe between queries, just the duration of the span, the threaded nature of the conversation matches tracing nicely. They could write some cool TraceQL queries to see who was talking to who initiated questions the most. I think you could do some neat stuff with data in Tempo, that kind of data in Tempo. But I think it's cool that you found another like neat application of other data besides just distributed tracing, traditional distributed tracing.
Yeah, it was cool indeed. And I think it was coincidence, but 2 more people came asking, how can I take advantage of tracing if I only have logs? And I was like, why is everyone suddenly caring about this or interested about this? Maybe it was coincidence, or maybe this sort of feature request is more common than, or use case more common than we thought. That was really cool. Also, something that was very nice to see was that most of what people were interested in, like next for Tempo and Grafana, we either are already actively working on it, or we're building the tools and features that eventually will support those features. So I think in terms of databases, the highlight was explore metrics and then explore logs, which is essentially, instead of having to type queries, you're able to find the data that you want just by click, click, click. Every time you click, you dig deeper into the data without having to have a deep understanding of how PromQL works or LogQL works. And it's just a faster way of navigating and an easier way of navigating through that data. I mean, one telemetry type was missing, which was traces, and people were very interested. Either they went with an APM focus, like I've tried app observability, and I just saw explore metrics. Are you doing anything of the sort, or directly explore metrics? And I believe what we're working in, it's very related, or we'll be able to enhance that experience. So it was nice to see that what we're working on and our priorities are very lined up with what people are demanding and more interested in.
Cool.
And yeah, I don't know what else to mention. I think
sure. You did hint at a future tracing app. Is that going to happen, Mario?
Yeah, I don't know. My PM is not here, so, or any PMs.
Well, that's why people come to the community call, so they can have discussions unburdened by people like PMs.
Right.
To talk about it, yes, we are building a tracing app. In fact, we almost wanted to demo it today. It's really dev. It's very much alpha. We're still like trying to arrange how things are going. So I would say next community call, we'll for sure have like a tracing app demo. I almost did it today, but things are just not quite aligned to really show, I think. But expect that. So an app where you're not typing TraceQL queries, but anyone can just click your UI and get value out of Tempo.
Exactly. Okay. Now you're in trouble.
I'm always in trouble.
All
My
right.
job to be in trouble. Cool. Any cool community interactions? Any maybe like a one-off conversation? You had somebody who's excited about some cool thing in Tempo or Grafana that you want to share?
Well, I would have to think. So I got a feedback. It was this person asking for a more APM-ish experience with tracing, They were using app observability, and they liked it, but felt I had some rough edges. We were discussing through that. They gave me feedback even from their engineers. They like talked to them in Slack, like, I'm with this person from the Tempo team. Just give me all the feedback that you have. And in the end, like they care about this feature. They were very happy. And like the last line was, I just want a better way of interacting with the traces because I love them so much. And myself, I'm an SRE. I know TraceQL, and I have no bad things to say about Tempo. The database, I feel like, works amazing, and
Yes, it does work
and that
amazing.
was like very positive. So even when there was tough feedback, like I don't like this UI, it was all from a very positive and constructive point of view.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's
Yeah.
good news. Love that you represented us there. Mario was our Tempo person, and I think he did an awesome job, of course.
Oh, and I got my forehead tattooed with Tempo.
Where is that tattoo, sir? I don't see
You
it.
can find a picture in Twitter.
An embarrassing temporary tattoo.
Yes, I think the process of multiple people getting their foreheads tattooed will appear in the recap video or something. I don't know how it'll be called, but
Sure.
yeah.
Very cool. Tempo is amazing. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's talk about other ways the Tempo is amazing in the future. Zach, I think, has got some a long-running request we've had. We've never gotten to it, a good security fix he worked on the past week or two. Zach, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, this was a big procrastination on our part. So yeah, breaking change went in last week. Check the change log. But the short summary is we changed the UID of the Docker container, which has the effect of you need to make an update to the ownership of the files on disk for the ingester and the metrics generator, unless you're already handling the security context in some special way. So for the JSON users, I included a bit of JSON utility that will help there, and I prepped a Helm chart PR today that we will include an example before release of the next version of Tempo. So if you're running main, this will affect you now, and so you might want to make this change immediately. And if you're not, then this will affect you on the next release. So keep your eye out for that. Yeah, any questions about that? Cool.
Yeah, I swear somebody filed that issue like 6 months after we released Tempo, and I always wanted to get to it. It's kind of a very strong thing to be doing with your Docker security. So I was glad you finally got to that one. That's a
I think it was like
good pickup.
a 3-digit issue or something like that. So yes, like a 2-year-old issue. Somebody said, "Hey, did you do this?" But to be honest with you, I got a little nervous about changing permissions on a bunch of files, and so
Yeah,
I hacked around it internally. But it was time to solve it.
cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Cool. So next up, I'm going to talk a bit about exposing some internal data from Tempo in TraceQL that we did recently. We are exposing a set of data associated with every span called the nested set values, or the nested set model. So this is a specific way to encode a tree, which of course a trace is, in a set of integers, like flatten a tree basically into a row. Which we do in our spans. And this allows us to do all that structural queries like the child, the descendant, the ancestor queries are done using these integer values we store in the in the span level. So to show a quick example, I'm running a query here, and I'm now able to select what's called left, right, and parent. This tells us where in the tree these spans are. They can tell you if it's a descendant, or if it's a ancestor, or a child, or a sibling of another. I'm not going to get into all the details because I could probably spend half an hour going to what all these numbers mean. Highly recommend working through this page if you're interested. The cool thing here, the reason we added this is some customers were asking some very difficult questions of Tempo. They wanted to know the entire tree beneath specific endpoints. And this, querying this data out, allowed them to do that. So they were doing some specific things like, API equals foo, and version equals bar, and obviously this is not real TraceQL, and service equals Baz or whatever. So they wanted to know for very specific combinations of filters, what are all of the downstream services, and what does the tree look like? And this now lets you rebuild that tree on your site. So you can do some cool analysis with this. The other reason we added is for the recently mentioned super secret leaked app. So the other reason we released this is because we want a part of the app to be a highlight structural analysis of traces and structural display of traces. And this allows the app to query that same data out and rebuild like structure in aggregate, which we're really excited about and we're working on as we speak. One last data point about these is they open up new and interesting queries which never existed in Tempo before, like is root. So you can ask for roots, which I think is cool. So if you do parent is -1, that's a flag for this is root. It also lets you ask, I think this is even cooler, you can ask for leaves. So if nested set left and minus right, and again, please refer to all the details. I apologize, I'm not going to have them offhand. Is it 1 or -1? -1? There you go. So this will be all the leaves. So you can write a query now in Tempo that will find all of the leaves of your trace, which is kind of a neat ability for sure. So I'm not sure what some of this is going to land in, but I like that. I like having things that allow people to be creative and find uses. I think we're going to find cool uses in our app. I think, like I said, we already have 1 or 2 customers who wanted this because they wanted to rebuild structure. And maybe some of the community will find neat applications for these new intrinsics as well. Cool. I think that's it. Any nested set questions? I know it's kind of a big brain dump. This is, if you spend some time with this, you'll be like, oh, that makes total sense. But just seeing it immediately can be confusing. So spend some time with it if you want. Learn about how this model is created. I think you'll find you can do some very neat queries in Tempo 2.5, and we're going to showcase that in the app as well. All right. Kunrad added something recently, shuffle sharding, which has been present in Mimir and Loki for a long time and has given us some nice performance increase. I will hand the floor to Kunrad.
Yeah. So recently added ingester shuffle sharding to Tempo, similar to how it exists in Mimir and Loki. I think it was originally introduced in Cortex, so it's been in like the databases for a while. We're just like catching up now. So shuffle sharding, the idea is if you have a multi-tenant cell, you have a lot of different tenants and they're all sending data to the ingesters. What can happen is if one of the ingesters goes down, this will impact all the tenants. So what you want to do with shuffle sharding is instead of allocating all the tenants to all the ingesters, you kind of like shard them in smaller subrings and you shuffle them around. So that way, not all the tenants are allocated to all the ingesters. So maybe one tenant gets ingester 1, 3, and 5. The other one gets 1, 2, and 6. So if ingester 3 goes down, it doesn't impact all of the tenants. So in that way, it's a reliability improvement. We also noticed it has a big resource reduction as well in highly multi-tenant cells. So it's also like something we're looking into right now. I made like a simple presentation to just like share some cool graphs, because I mean, why not?
Who doesn't like cool graphs? Everybody likes cool graphs.
So it's controlled with 2 settings. There's a runtime override, ingestion tenant shard size. This is a per tenant setting, and it will basically control how big the shard size will be of that tenant. So how many ingesters are allocated to the tenant. If you put in 0, it's just use all ingesters. So like if you have 10 of them, it will use 10 of them. If you put in 3, it will only look at 3 ingesters and then send data to those 3, still using the RF tree like usual. If you put 6, it will use 6 of the 10. So you can kind of like play with that and control it depending on like how big your tenant is. A second setting we added is like a toggle on the querier, which can disable shuffle sharding. And this is something you would need during rollout, because if you enable the shard size, you will decrease the ingesters, like the ring used for querying. And at that point, until the data is flushed, you won't query data that's on ingesters that are not part of the ring anymore. So during rollout, you should first set this flag to false, so you don't use shuffle sharding on the query path, then decrease the shard size, and then after an hour or two, you can set this flag to true again, or just drop it completely because it defaults to true, and then everything is fine. But we'll be described in docs by the time we release it. So I just wanted to share some quick graphs. We've been rolling this out in our internal clusters this week. It's still in progress, so I don't have like a ton of graphs yet. But this is like in a mid-sized to smallish cluster. The first thing you'll notice that the first graph is how many bytes each ingester is receiving. So this is ingestion per pod. At first, it was really balanced, like every ingester was receiving the exact same amount. That's because we were using just a regular round robin, like load balancing with the sharding. So every tenant is sending to every ingester. Once we enable shuffle sharding, this will be split up a bit. And most tenants were allocated 3 ingesters only. And then it kind of depends on, like, is this a big tenant? Then that ingester will receive a bit more than the others. So it's a bit more unbalanced. But what you can also see is the amount of active tenants per pod decreased a lot. So before, every ingester had to allocate some memory to deal with every tenant. So it was about 50 tenants. Afterwards, it dropped to between 10 to 20 tenants. So we kind of expect there, if every ingester is like keeping less tenants in memory, overall memory usage will reduce. And that's also something we noticed in resource usage. So around 2 p.m. is when we rolled this out. You can see CPU lowers a bit. So just enabling shuffle sharding reduces overall CPU in the ingesters. And can also see here memory drops a bit. And then after 2 hours-ish, it drops a lot. And if I grab like the overall metrics, you can see the entire cluster ingesters used about 64 gigabytes of memory. Then after the change was rolled out and the data was flushed, it dropped to about 40 gigabytes. So it's like a 30% reduction just by enabling shuffler sharding. So like it's still ingests the same data, it's still storing the same data. It doesn't really like change in any way. And global CPU also dropped from 2.4 to 1.2-ish. So it's also a reduction in half. So it's basically happening is before every tenant was sending to every ingester. But it means if you have a very small tenant, it's just sending like a very small trickle to every ingester. By setting the shard size, you kind of concentrate the tenant and just like send more to like less ingesters.
Do you have any guesses on that 2-tier drop? Like there was an immediate drop on both on memory, and then over time a larger drop. Any ideas there?
I'm not entirely sure. It's not correlated to a rollout or some other like increase in traffic or decrease in traffic. So I didn't really see a correlation. I'm guessing at some point, like when you enable the shard size, some tenants will grow stale. They won't receive any data anymore on the ingesters. Mm-hmm. And then it works to flush all the data. And I think that's around the time it probably flushed it.
Yeah, it must be.
But it's like 2 hours, so that seems kind of long.
I thought the same. Like I would have expected that more like after half an hour, where it starts. Yeah. The wall would be dropped and would no longer be created, and we'd start dropping complete blocks. I mean, I love these savings. I kind of want to dig into that reasoning, though. That might reveal something important about the ingesters. That 2 hours is definitely more than I've expected, but still an amazing resource save for anybody doing a multi-tenant. So very cool.
Yeah. I wanted to see if this also happens in different clusters. So I have 2 more graphs. This is like on a bigger cell, one of the bigger cells. You can see the same pattern. Like at first, they're all pretty balanced. You can see they differ a bit depending on like how they're allocated. And once you enable shuffle sharding, this kind of spreads out. So some tenants will use more, some pods will receive more, some will receive less, just based upon like how they're like allocated. But the huge drop here is before every ingester was like tracking 200 tenants. Afterwards, it's like 20. So it's just like a lot less.
Do you have
hard
resource
to
savings for
run.
that cell yet?
It's happening right now. So like the CPU, I rolled this out like last hour.
Oh,
So
you're my hero, Kunrad.
so CPU dropped immediately from like 40-ish to 30. And memory is also coming down. So I'm kind of wondering if this will see the same thing, that it drops a lot after 2 hours or not.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Very nice. Very cool.
still pending.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's basically shuffle sharding. It's mostly useful in highly multi-tenant cells. So as a reliability and like also a resource saving technique. In smaller cells or cells with only one tenant, it doesn't make sense to use this.
Cool.
Because, I mean, you just use all the ingesters, so it's only for multi-tenant cells.
All right, team. Great work. Marty, you exist. I did not expect you to exist. Do you want to talk about compaction, or no, I'm just getting to know?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Next time.
We may or may not be trying to improve compaction. I'll let Marty tell you in a month. And you all can figure that one out. Cool. Any questions, concerns, thoughts, well wishes? Or are we going to wrap it up? What's it going to be?
I'm pretty excited to see all these changes going in. I think the shuffle sharding is super cool. This nested set is really cool. Yeah, great stuff.
The shuffle sharding and the compaction changes that may or may not be happening are great operational improvements that we've just struggled to get it put time to because we put so much time into TraceQL and all these other things. But they're overdue, and they are going to make a massive impact, I believe, on TCO and performance for sure. Cool.
Yeah, one question I had on the shuffle sharding, we saw the memory drop. So I guess we're kind of guessing a little bit that the wall replay of the tenants that are no longer sending data to those ingesters probably has something to do with that initial decrease. But then does the ingester then hang on to a tenant that hasn't sent it data for an additional hour? Like what's the time an ingester on in those graphs is hanging on to that data? Are we thinking it's an hour?
Well, that's why I'm confused about the 2 hours, because there's that complete block timeout. And the job of the complete block timeout is to drop those blocks in the ingester because they're in the back end, the queryers know about them, and they're queryable. But I think that's only like 20 minutes in prod or half an hour in prod. So I would expect a quick drop immediately because they're just doing less, taking less traffic. But then I would expect after 30 minutes to see a major decrease as it flushes all those blocks. It doesn't care about anymore. So that does make me wonder if maybe the wall's hanging on to something too long. I don't know. It's one of those things that you want to go rabbit hole a little bit. I'm not sure I'm going to have time, but it would certainly, it might teach us something important about the ingesters that might help us save otherwise.
Yeah, I guess the follow-up there is if we restart on a cluster that we've rolled the shuffle sharding out, if we restart, do we pick the memory back up where we were?
No, we used to have issues with wall hanging around and blocks hanging around for tenants that stopped sending, but that should all be cleaned up. This would actually be a great test, Kunrad. While you're in the middle of all this, if you want to shell into an ingester and confirm that all the tenants are kind of like decreasing correctly, because we did have issues for probably months. And I think I'm pretty sure Marty kicked it around for a while. I think I patched it some too. I think I think everybody had their hand in there for a little bit to get it so it would like cleanly and correctly drop all the tenants that weren't sending data.
Nice.
Does it leave behind like an empty directory? Or does it also remove it?
I think it removes it. It's hilarious. This is the same conversation as the tenant index kind of in the blocks. But yeah, I think it has logic. Maybe it's only on startup where it's like if there's nothing, it does like it's been so long since I looked at that code. But yeah, it would be worth definitely checking to make sure that things get cleaned up correctly. But cool. All right, crew. I think I'm going to call it. Appreciate all your all's time. We will see you in April. May is the month after April. All our taxes will be paid correctly, and we'll, be happy people. Take care. I will see you in a month.
Bye, everybody.